It's been almost 3 months since Kayvan and the task force of NOPADs had fled the Alang coast on board the Copperfield container ship. And during this time they've been transporting everything from food supplies to computers and tech equipment. Their very latest pickup, 65 Australian refugees. Next stop, Singapore's Brani Island. It had begun around the mid-30s, when the rising sea levels had swept away a third of the commercial ports around the world. In an attempt to resist this new threat to their economy, Singapore built a seawall in an effort to shield their seaport from the massive storms that followed on from the rising seas. Brani Island was established and fully AI automated in the way of cargo distribution, and is one of the central hubs to the global trade system. Even though Rao had provided his crew with very convincing fake IDs to help them get through the scanners, everyone was on edge and completely silent as they approached their destination. The Singaporean Port Authority was renowned for their aggressive responses to any unwanted visitors. So if they did happen to sense anything out of place, the repercussions could be very unfortunate for those concerned. A specialist by the name of Casper Van Dala explained to Kayvan that Singapore used to tolerate the NOPADs. However, things started quickly going downhill as more and more people passing through started throwing out the NOPAD sympathy card, regardless of whether or not their intentions were true. The US, who placed an incredible amount of value and significance on this particular trade port, were also becoming increasingly wary of losing this location, so they began pushing all of their anti-NOPAD propaganda, which in turn eventually forced Singapore to completely shut the NOPAD fleets out. They managed to dock undetected, and by using his OVP recon drone, Casper sweeps the area and is able to give the all clear. Rao began quickly directing the refugees into an old shipping container. Inside was a toilet, bedding, and enough supplies to last 10 days. Unfortunately, before they were able to get everyone safely inside, they were spotted. Almost immediately, a number of alarms and sirens began to echo throughout the port, and robotic security forces, called Rangers, suddenly appeared and began advancing towards them. Casper, wasting no time, rapidly took them down using his rifle. Escaping back onto their vessel, the Copperfield slowly departed from the dock, while Rao hacked into the automated distribution system and proceeded to drop containers wherever he could in an attempt to block the pursuing vessels. The Singaporean Port Authority followed them out into the open waters. With the sound of gunfire and battle cries coming from behind them, their foe seemed to be catching up on them. Suddenly, there was a dead silence. But then this ended abruptly, and an enormous booming sound from a cannon being fired was heard. Kayvan and the others braced for impact. Yet almost immediately, he realized that this sound didn't come from behind them. Out in front of the Copperfield, on the horizon, they see a huge number of fishing trawlers, container ships, tugboats, and much, much more. It's a NOPAD fleet. The Singaporean Port Authority is now vastly outnumbered, and immediately they call off the chase and head back towards the coast. The Copperfield has been floating around somewhere in the Yellow Sea for the last 2 days, waiting on orders from higher up. Specialist Webster McKay tells Kayvan that Oz generally only provides just enough intel to keep the operations moving. He sends this out via telegraph with only basic points, so only those intended to receive these messages would be able to understand them. Kayvan has been passing the time by keeping up to date, following the steady stream of news being broadcasted around the globe. As it turns out, there was one story in particular that would soon involve the Copperfield and its crew. The news report talks of an incident at Daesung Electronics. South Korea is one of the few success stories of the last decade. Their economy wasn't just surviving, it was growing. And one of the companies that can be credited with the bulk of this success is Daesung Electronics. Before the blackout in 2040 that dropped Earth back into the Dark Ages, most of the world had switched over to satellite internet. This earthbound internet service provider came up with a solution that would get the world back online without the need to roll out expensive hardware across the planet. This ISP was called KNet. By 2041, Daesung had 60% of all internet traffic running through its servers, which in turn flowed through to the quantum data center in the middle of Songdo. Naturally, the sheer volume of information going through this data center would provide a significant tactical advantage for those who were able to get their hands on it. So US and Russian intelligence networks keep a very close eye on what's happening here. At around 7:30 AM, an executive assistant at Daesung Electronics made out with 10 terabytes of internal data from their headquarters in Songdo, South Korea, and escaped on a stolen corporate helicopter. The identity behind this was an unexpected Korean woman in her 20s. Immediately it was assumed that she was a foreign intelligence asset from one of the two main superpower countries, the US or Russia. But what they didn't realize is that there was a third faction who was interested in this intel war. After Kayvan finished with the news, he headed up above deck. While looking over the horizon, he noticed something approaching in the distance. It was a black helicopter, and on the side was the Daesung logo. The entire crew has now assembled on the side of the ship. Suddenly, the helicopter appears to lose control, and eventually crashes down in the distance. Kayvan looks around at the crew, but no one seems to be particularly concerned about this, and a minute later it would all make sense. Above the ship there was a woman parachuting down. It was the Korean woman who had made off with the intel from Daesung Electronics. After she landed on the deck, Casper and Rao quickly escort her inside. She is known as Specialist Jae-Soo Paik, a non-PAT agent put in place by Oz, who's been working undercover at Daesung. Kayvan reflects back on his time over the months with this crew of no-PATs. The government had led everyone to believe that they were the enemy, but after Singapore, he was convinced that they were the sympathetic underdogs, making the hard choices to help the struggling survive. But now, he was witnessing them infiltrate international tech giants, beating the global superpowers at their own game. Perhaps there is far more to this group of nationless soldiers that we've been led to believe.